Hello guys, it's Jonathan here. Today we're doing another Bakugan BakuTech Retrospect episode. This is episode 16 on Bone Skulls. Bone Skulls was released as BTC 34 and was later re-released in both BCV 25 Emperor's Second Coming and BCV 26 Best Selection. It is a Darkest Bakugan. It has 580, 590, or 600 Gs, and it was released in December of 2011. Taking a look at the ball form, it has black plastic, also some green markings around it, has a fair bit of metal with the built-in metal and then the cross piece up here. Bit of silver there as well. But yeah, looks pretty good. Opening it up, it opens up like that and has no manual parts. Now, taking a look at Bone Skulls, this thing has a very large design. Also, I really like the arms here with the black and silver stripes. Always just thought it was a very cool detail. But yeah, very large and, especially for the time, interesting Bakugan. So as for what it does, first up, it does have its one crosspiece on its head here, but also it does have a metal ring kind of going around with the built-in metal underneath here, and combined with the crosspiece, yeah, it gives it that ring, allows it to roll fairly straight because of it, while also giving it a bit of extra bulk towards the bottom to help weight it down. Its main gimmick though is Skull Cyclone. Skull Cyclone you kind of see with this screw right here, and basically it can spin, kind of. But yeah, the center point stays there, this thing can move. It's not the most dramatic spin, it doesn't spin when it opens or anything, but it's meant to help deflect attacks. Basically you have to hit this center point right here in order to crit KO this thing. Anywhere else is a lot smaller, harder to really get a good hit on to knock it off the card, and also the fact that it spins means it's hard to really get enough force on that to, again, knock it off the card. It's not really the most effective gimmick, as the spin on this thing isn't really loose enough. I feel like a lot of the time when a Bakugan catches on these parts, the entire thing kind of just tends to move, at least sometimes. Sometimes it actually works, other times it doesn't. It's pretty inconsistent. I mean, it helps, don't get me wrong. Like, I'd rather have it than not. But with how the Bakugan is structured, with a lot of these very long parts detached from the main body, and I feel like without the spin it'd work probably in a pretty similar manner. It's just that the spin helps it all a little bit more, which, again, you'll take anything you can get, but it's nothing too crazy. As far as how to close this thing goes, first up, make sure you're aligned correctly here. So there's this little, like, divot on one side here. Make sure the head is aligned that way. Then I take the tail first here and put it up, and hold that there in place, put the head back, and then these parts here just kind of fold in. It kind of collapse in on the head there, and then for these arms, these hands just kind of fold in, and these just go back completely, and then those are in, and then do the same thing on this side. And there you go, Bone Skulls is now closed. Looking at the anime and manga, Bone Skulls is owned by Zakuro, leader of the Baku Thieves, at least in the manga, and just the overall main antagonist of the series. Early on in BakuTech, Bone Skulls was his secondary Bakugan to, of course, Diocivic. Of course, as the series would progress and Zakuro would get more Bakugan, Bone Skulls wouldn't be to the same level that it initially was when it was, you know, one of two main Bakugan, but it still had a pretty decent focus, I would say, was still fairly relevant, so Bone Skulls is a pretty noteworthy one. And just being owned by the main antagonist in any capacity is fairly noteworthy as is. Next up we have the variants, and Bone Skulls is yet another Bakugan that does not have any variants. Any re-releases of Bone Skulls are just literal re-releases of this exact Bakugan, like I mentioned with the BCV stuff towards the start of the video. Looking at competitive, Bone Skulls is actually pretty interesting. At the time of its release, it was the largest Bakugan, and it wasn't really close. Like, picking this thing up and just putting it at center card, roughly, it takes up a fair bit of the card. And again, considering that this was like the 16th Bakugan released in BakuTech, at least in terms of like original stuff, this was a pretty big deal. Again, just a very large Bakugan, has pretty solid defense as well. So I think early on this thing does quite a bit of work. It's a good occupancy Bakugan, really the best there was at the time. And it had one other gimmick of sorts that we'll get to. But a little bit after this thing came out, we would get Acro Gizzard, and Acro Gizzard is just a better occupancy Bakugan than Bone Skulls, though Bone Skulls was still a good option. But then we get things like Daifujo, which is also better, and then of course once you get to BakuTech Gachi, defense occupancy stuff just gets ridiculous, and Bone Skulls isn't quite that good for it anymore. I'd say as is, it's not on Acro Gizzard or Daifujo's level, but I would still put it at like a high B tier. However, there is one other thing to take into account for Bone Skulls, and that is its gate card. So normally I don't talk about cards much, but I feel like this one in particular is a bit of a weird case because it's basically an auto win for Bone Skulls. It's a low G wins card, but Bone Skulls on its own card is set to 0 Gs, which 0 Gs on a low G wins gate card is an auto win. You can definitely play a lot of mind games with this. If your opponent thinks you have a setup here with Bone Skulls, maybe you actually chose a different card, and they're freaked out about nothing. Or again, if you're on that card, well, you kind of force interaction because it's a pretty big Bakugan. You could definitely set up for double stands at least decently. So it's important to get this thing off of its card, either by crit KO or just KO to try and clear the field. Otherwise, this could easily lead to a double stand. But if you do try and KO it and it doesn't get knocked off the card and the other Bakugan stands, well, now you're forced into a G-Power battle with this thing on its own card, which is an auto win. I feel like there's a lot of potential to this thing. The only thing holding it back, really, is you can only have one of those cards, which does prevent it from being like one of the best G-Power battlers, or I guess the antithesis of G-Power battlers, as that's only a one-time use, but you could still, again, play some mind games, maybe get another card out of it by tricking your opponent into thinking, you know, you're on Bone Skulls' gate card when you're really not. Anyway, I could talk a lot about that, but that's probably not the time for it. Because of what this thing can do, and the fact that you get an auto-win card, some other weird stuff, and it's at least a decent Bakugan physically, even after Gachi, I still think this thing is very, very good. Not perfect, but by my own metrics, it is still mid-A tier. Certainly a worthwhile Bakugan. But anyways, that's really all for this video. I like Bone Skulls a lot. Again, I could go on about this thing for quite a while, but anyway, next episode will be on Flame Eagle, so until then, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.